This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT show. It's been another great day for British democracy. Having actively fought for many months against the publication of the so-called Russia report, we now learn from the UK government that they did nothing wrong. And if anything was amiss, it was all down to Alex Salmond. Well, who knew? I have to say one thing though, even from a cursory reading of the Russia report, I'm left with one fairly outstanding conclusion, which is this government is the best government that money can buy. Hi, my name is John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 exciting minutes. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. We have yet another great guest for you, and I'm really excited that she is able to be with us tonight. Stay tuned for her fight to keep Scotland a brand and all that entails. But first, a few words about TNT. The nation talks. The nation talks to Scotland. The nation talks. It's you. You are the nation. We look forward to your questions live as we go through the show. So don't hesitate. If you hear anything or you want explanations, drop us a note. You'll see the details on the screen. You can also write to me at john@cliche.com. There's all sorts of channels you can use, and feel free to do so. Now to our guest tonight. The nation talks to Ruth Watson. Among the best in the world. Most of us would agree. But that status may be in jeopardy. Happily, Ruth is fighting to keep Scotland a brand well to the fore. Ruth joins us from Killiamure. How are you, Ruth? How are you coping with me?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, Killiamure's been a really nice place to be stuck. We're extremely lucky here. There's lots of space, so it's been very easy for us to get out into the woods and the hills and the glens, even when we were allowed to just go 7 miles from the house. That takes in a large part of some of the most beautiful countryside Scotland has to offer. So we've been really, really lucky. We've had enough, we had stores put by because we could see there was trouble coming. We've got a house, which means that everyone has space. There's been a few hair-raising moments to do with employment and income, but we're all here, we're all well, and we've been part of a community that's been looking out for each other. It's been really terrific the way that folk have kind of reached out to each other. So I've been doing a phone befriending. Lots of my colleagues have been going out getting messages in for people, and making sure prescriptions are taken care of. So I think it's been really rough for a lot of people. My heart goes out to people who have been stuck in flats or have had to worry about how do you socially distance when you're going down a tenement stair? How do you socially distance when you're surrounded by hundreds of thousands of other people? But in Kerry, we've been lucky. I had a close family member who was living in England, who lives in England, who was very, very ill. He was in intensive care twice with COVID. So it has really reinforced for me how desperately important it is that people wear a mask, they stay safe, and they dinna do a Cummings.
Well, they shouldn't do a Cummings, that's for sure. So tell us a bit about your background, Ruth.
Where do I start?
What was your early childhood like?
Well, life has just been, I'm one of these people, I've been sort of ludicrously lucky, and even when stuff's hitting the fan, I seem to come out the other side. I had a really lovely family upbringing in Edinburgh from a slightly shaky start. One of the reasons why I have been politically aware for much of my life is my parents were very politically aware, with a small p. They weren't party political, but they very much felt that we had to be the change we wanted to see. I'm adopted, and one of the reasons my family wanted to adopt children was to try and share the good fortune they had. So they adopted me. The story my mum told me, we were on holiday in Switzerland. I was 16 years old. I knew I'd been adopted all my life, I'd known. And we were going down an Alp. And my mum decided that was the time to sort of tell me what she knew about my background, which is very little, because in those days, adoption was sort of meant to be for life. It was never thought that you would know your background. So she said, well, we decided we wanted to do some good, and the church, I was adopted through the Church of Scotland. the church said, if you want to do real good, you will adopt someone from a hard to place category. So that was kind of new to me, to sort of thought that right from the beginning I'd been considered perhaps something of a problem. And she said, well, and there were three categories. She goes, there was the older children, and we didn't want older children because we had young children ourselves. Well, I knew I was taken at 4 days old, so I thought, well, that's that out the box. And she said we had mixed race children, and I thought, well, I'm white, so that's not it. And she goes, and we've got people with disabilities and learning needs. And I thought, okay, so what's coming now? And it turned out that what little she did know was that I was half Algerian. And subsequently through life, I've through a series of bizarre events, actually involving me staggering home from a nightclub. In fact, the nightclub that was in Train Spotting, I was walking home across some rough ground, 3:00 in the morning, didn't have any money for a taxi, but there were some gadgets behind me, so I was kind of staying close to the lads in front, and I knew they were speaking an Arab dialect because I learned a bit of Arabic. So we got to sort of the lights and the Tron in Glasgow, and I stopped them and I said, I don't suppose you guys know where there's a cash machine, do you? And they pointed me in the right direction. And as I was walking off, they said, excuse me, but where are you from? And to this day, I don't know why I said it. Well, I said, well, I'm Scottish, but I'm half Algerian. I'm from Scotland, but I'm half Algerian. And they said, oh, where in Algeria? And I said, oh, a place called Dintaya. And they went, well, we're from Dintaya. And I went, aye, right, guys. And they went, no. And they said, what's your family name? And so I said, well, I don't want to go into details. And I always call my dad, and my adoptive father, my biological father, but I didn't go into details. So I just said, well, my family, my father's name was Mulud Ben Chakal. And they went, yeah, we know him. And I said a few choice words because I thought they were pulling my leg. And I went, and they went, no. He was a really famous championship boxer in Algeria in the 1990s. He said he won against France. The whole of Algeria was cheering. He was like Muhammad Ali of Algeria. The whole of the nation was cheering for him when he knocked the Frenchman out. And I went, yeah, my goodness, how can I get in touch with him? Because there'd been the civil war in Algeria, and I tried through the Red Crescent to make contact with family. Whole long story about how that all happened, how I sort of knew how to find my biological mother. So under this lamppost in the middle of Glasgow, in the middle of the night, with sort of the sound of this nightclub still going on in the background, we're exchanging phone numbers. And 2 days later, I got this phone call. And it was like, congratulations, Ruth, my friend in London is your cousin. So they gave me this guy's phone number, and I phoned him up, and he went, oh my God! So anyway, so I was born in Aberfeldy, delivered by the inestimable man, Dr. Wati Yellowlees. And again, bizarrely, many years later, I was doing a program about, I can't remember what it's called, about not biorhythmia, the kind of agriculture where you sort of, you pick the plant when Mars is in the right, Mars is ascending of thing.
Yeah.
And he was the president of, he was the person to speak to in Scotland about it. So I phoned him, and I knew from having been in contact with my birth mother, because she'd made contact many years ago, and that's a whole other story. So I did the whole interview and asked him if he would take part, and that was all fine. And I knew that he'd kept in touch with my biological mother all those years. And I said, but by the way, I don't suppose you remember of this woman? And I said her name, and he said, yes, I do. And I said, you delivered a baby? And he went, yes, I remember. I said, I'm the baby. And he went, oh, my child, how are you? So I sort of, life sort of has these weird sort of circularities to it. But I had I was sent to a suffragette school in Edinburgh, and my granny had gone to it when it was first opened, and then my mum went, and then I went. And I have to say, it seemed a little less suffragette and a little less radical by the time I was at it. It was an interesting education. It taught me a lot about people and how snotty people can be. But luckily, I had a very sound mum and dad who sort of saw me onto the right side.
Good, excellent. Tell us how you ended up in prison at Corton Vale.
Well, that was actually part of me being raised right. So my uncle had been, he was a very staunch anti-nuclear activist, and he'd actually been on the Aldermaston March. But I didn't really know that. I just knew that I was raised in a house where everybody thought that nuclear weapons was wrong and immoral, but not sort of overtly. I got involved in the women's movement when I was about 18, 19. I sort of became very much involved with sort of feminist activism. And there was a demonstration down at Greenham Common, and I went. And I thought, wow, this is brilliant. And we came back up, and then I found out more about, this is the days before the internet, so these things all took a bit more time. And I found out more about Faslane and what was happening there, and I went out to have a look. And I just thought, this is just so horrific that it's happening, and everybody's just sort of sleepwalking as it goes past. So I got very much involved. I lived at Faslane for 2 years, and first of all, I lived in a bender, and then I lived in a caravan called the Wimps, because the people who'd originally lived in that caravan hadn't read Kerrang. And of course, Kerrang is not for wimps. So that caravan was called the Wimps. That was how I lived in that. Although I actually did used to read the Kerrang, which was a whole other story. But yeah, so we ended up doing a Stop Business as Usual day. And the purpose of Stop Business as Usual days is that as soon as somebody enters a nuclear facility, understandably, or a military facility, everything has to shut down until they find the intruders. So part of the idea of a Stop Business as Usual day is that you make the people who are just, the folk who are just trying to pay their mortgages and put food on the table, and they take a job and they do that job because that's the job that there is in that area. But just to stop and make them stop and think, why are these people doing this and what is happening? So every now and then we would kind of scamper in and do forays. Now, if you did that at Greenham, because there was so much of it going on, you could do a Stop Business as Usual day, and they would just kick you out the other side at the end of the demonstration. Please go back to your campfire. But at Faslane, if you got arrested, then you would you were in trouble. But this day we decided to do a Stop Business as Usual day, and we all tanked it. We went legging, and the shape I am now, I probably couldn't do it, but in those days I could scale a 6-foot fence pretty quickly and hot-foot it across a football pitch with feds chasing me. So me and my chums, we sort of scattered, and me and a small cohort ended up in the bin lorry, which it turns out is the second most expensive, apart from the submarines, it's the next most expensive vehicle on site. So we were sitting locked down. I was quite a cheeky wee thing at the time. And we're sitting there, and I've got everything locked up, and there's all these military chaps outside asking us politely to come out. And I'm going, no, we're not coming out. We're not coming out. We held them off for ages. And I said, okay. I said, I'll open up if you say pretty. Yes, you're being really rude. I'll open up if you say pretty, please. And the officer looked at me and pretty, please. And I went, okay, let's see what else we can do. I got him up to pretty, please, with sugar on and strawberries and cream before he decided to try and break the window to get us out. Anyway. That was what saw me ending up in the Young Offenders Institute at Cortonvale. So my top tip is, if you're ever going to court and you don't intend to pay the fine, do what I did, and you always take a spare pair of underpants with you, because they let you take one pair of underpants into prison, and the last thing you want is to wear prison pants. So you can take a pair to wash a pair, and then everything's nice and fresh.
So what did you do after your term of imprisonment?
Oh, I just went back to living in a caravan at Faslane and creating mischief and havoc. But I always used to be really cheerful. One of my moments of real pride was when the convoy was going past. Now the convoy, it's just one of these really sinister things that is very mundane, which is where nuclear warheads get shipped off by lorry, down to is it Aldermaston? I think it maybe is Aldermaston.
Yeah, sounds like.
Yep, down there to get them sort of refurbished and then sent back up again. And it's just driving up and down the roads. And if one of those things goes kaboom, it's not going to be a nuclear explosion, but it will be a dirty bomb. There's going to be like a 5-mile wide crater. And these are driving past people's homes and schools and going through Scotland's most populous city and all the way down. So we always used to try and stop it, just the way you do, sort of throw yourself in the ground. Anyway, this one particular day, we had some paint, and I'd filled some condoms with yellow paint. And the police were all standing in front, because we'd actually caused quite a big strop the time before. Somebody had actually managed to get quite close to it and had lain down in the road. So there was loads of feds, loads of bobbies standing to make sure that we couldn't get near it. And I managed to sort of gently kind of swing, and I got it just the sweet spot right across the side of it. So before I legged it to go and hide in the woods for an hour or so, I had the joy of seeing this lorry disappear off with this big splatter of yellow paint across it. And there's an organisation called Convoy Watch that take photographs of it. And sometime later, I saw a photograph of that lorry going past with a big splat of yellow paint. So I was that made my day. But after that experience actually was really what helped me get in. Well, not the experience of throwing the condom filled with yellow paint, but the experience of being at the peace camp. That was what actually got me into journalism, because we used to phone up, and let the Guardian and others know what was going on at Greenham, if there was military procedures going on, or there was some really scary stuff, like when there was one time the Israelis were going up to the Golan Heights. There was real tension with the Cold War. We knew that the Israelis were going up with missiles to the Golan Heights, and it was really scary. And it was the one time that I've seen the nuclear missiles going out, and we knew the nuclear missiles were in it. At Greenham, there was nuclear convoys that would go out sort of on dummy runs, and we knew that this time was different because the alert flag had gone up. I think it was sort of DEFCON black. I think that was the code it was. And this time when the soldiers came out, they weren't, they were serious and they were scared. And that night we actually had soldiers coming down to the campfires to talk to us about it because they were scared. I mean, it was nuts. And I'm sitting looking at all these people going about their daily business thinking, Armageddon could happen tonight. I know that there are nuclear missiles out on Greenham Common. Armageddon could happen tonight, and everybody's just going about their business like nothing, like it's business as usual. So we were talking to journalists and trying to get people to listen, and that was the point at which I really understood how important honest and fair journalism is to democracy. So some years later, when the opportunity presented itself, that was when I started training as a journalist to try and genuinely spread information and give people the opportunities to make choices based on sourced information and genuine facts.
I think what we'll do is, that's very interesting. I think we'll come back to that in a second. Tell us a little bit about Keep Scotland the brand, because I expect some of the audience will know about the work you're doing, but many people might not.
Well, Keep Scotland the brand came out of several things. When I was working in Orkney and Shetland, I sort of became a sort of de facto fisheries and farming correspondent because, I wasn't the official, don't let me take that kudos, I wasn't the official farming and fisheries correspondent, but I was a freelance. And so sort of the local crew weren't able to take on some of the work that was being asked by, if the World Service wanted something done, for example. So I was very interested in farming and fisheries. I get very dewy-eyed when discussing sort of square net as opposed to diamond mesh. So that gave me a grounding, having lived in and worked in Orkney and Shetland for a number of years, having helped shift bales and bring out lambs into the world. I had a bit of an understanding about farming and fisheries. And then in the 1990s, when I was still working as a journalist, the Scotland, the brand marketing campaign was launched in Scotland. And it was an act of marketing genius, and I noticed it and took note of it and applauded it. And then life took me down the road of motherhood, and my husband took work overseas. And so we ended up living in Malaysia for a number of years. And over there, I became very conscious of how important Scotland's brand was when you were going into some of the upmarket supermarkets. And I became friends with a guy who he was the buyer for a supermarket chain in Malaysia and Singapore. We became friends over Orkney cheddar. On his shop shelf, and I asked him if he could get the smoked cheddar. So we got chatting about it, and I noticed that he had, Scotch lamb and Scotch beef. He sold water. Now I used to get these big water cooler bottles for about 4 ringgit, which is about £1. And that was reverse osmosis treated because the water coming out of the rivers there was so badly polluted. And he used to sell a litre of water for, I think it was 5 times that. Pardon me, I think it was 16 ringgit he sold it for. It's £4 for a litre of water. And he sold it, huge big stacks of it. And there's a big sign saying, Scottish water, filtered for 10,000 years by Scots granite. And that is the power of Scotland's brand. This guy had a $30 million annual budget for buying food and drink for the supermarket chain. Yep. And he said to me, I am desperate to get Scottish produce. He said, when the first line-caught salmon is bought, I have people bidding to buy it so that I can get it flown over here to put in pride of place on the display. And he said, I find it really hard that the embassy had changed. And there was no longer the international sort of trade ambassadors going out. He said, if I phone Chile up and I say, I like your wine, within a week, I will have a Chilean over with 20 or 30 different kinds of wine, and they will bring other products with them. He said, I can't get that for Scotland now. So I took it upon myself, because I am that kind of person, to phone around and to email. I wasn't phoning, I was emailing every area in Scotland to say, can you get in touch with this guy to sell him some of your cheese, or, here's somebody who wants to buy your produce. And so that was all sort of fermenting at the back of my mind. And when I came over, when we moved back to Scotland in 2015, it just struck me one day. It must have been about 2016, 17. I was in the shop and I looked around, and I live in an agricultural area, and the carrots had been, I started over carrots. The carrots had been Angus carrots. They hadn't been anything fancy. They had just been Angus carrots. And then this day, they weren't Angus carrots. They were Great British carrots with a half union flag across them. Now, that is indeed technically correct. However, knowing as I do that local provenance is excellent for business, the more local the provenance, the better business is. Research time and time again shows this. And I'm enough of a nerd that I knew that. And it tied in with me having noticed the Farmer Jonesy podcast, which was talking about, there had been an article saying Scotch beef farmers up in uproar, and it's really hard to get a Scottish farmer into uproar. I mean, a steady grumble maybe, but and it was because the Japanese, during the Japanese Canadian CETA trade talks, the European Union had been asked to submit their protected geographic indicator names for protection. And across the European Union, 3,000 food names had been submitted. And the United Kingdom, which was still a part of the European Union, but by that point the Brexit vote had happened, had not submitted one name for protection. Not one of the food names that they have across the whole of the United Kingdom, all the nations, not one food name had been submitted. And that was the point at which I started looking more at what was going on, because my journalistic nose, I knew that there was something up. There was it's kind of like you can see the omens were around me. It's like, it would be like sitting in the middle of a disaster movie, instead of shouting, "Send me a sign, O Lord," and there's lightning bolts and crows everywhere. It's pointing at you. There's something happening here. So I did a bit of digging, and I spoke to a few people, and that was when I realised that Scotland's brand was significantly in trouble and the potential for being eroded. And nothing I have seen since has given me cause for optimism. But I do have to say that any movement is only as good as the people who are supporting it. And people sometimes say, keep Scotland the brand is my campaign. Well, I am very protective of it. I founded it, and I have I do it completely for nothing at my kitchen table. But the campaign would be nowhere if it wasn't for the hundreds of thousands of people across Scotland who have made it happen. I worked my socks off making people aware about it. But the day that I really knew, and it's you're like howling at the moon and you don't know if anybody's listening. And one day I was standing outside the Forfar Farmers Market, and I dare you to say that quickly after a few gins, and a gentleman sidled up to me and he said, "Are you the reason I'm getting all these emails?" And I looked at him and said, "Oh, I do hope so." And it turned out that he was the general manager of a soft fruit supplier, and he had been inundated with thousands of emails. And I've been getting feedback from across businesses across Scotland that is actually really helpful to them. It's been really helpful to them to make the case, especially if their headquarters are further south, for them to be able to show the volume of weight of people who genuinely and sincerely and politely and positively and cheerfully are saying, you've got to keep Scotland the brand, because this is what matters. When you speak to farmers and fishermen, I mean, some of the farmers I've spoken to, and it is, I mean, this is not a party political campaign, and we all have to eat. So some of the farmers that contact me, or that I speak to, is because I wander around speaking to people at shows and stuff, and they're furious. It doesn't matter, on the whole, it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum they're from. They know that Scotland's name is good for business. They know that they have worked really hard to develop Scotland's international reputation for business. And so it would be like somebody taking the McDonald's Archies and saying, "We'll just scrub that, and hey, how about we try this logo?" You know, I mean, that's Scotland is the brand, and we lose that at our peril. And I think that we're really at the point of being faced with not just an existential, but a fundamental challenge to the viability of Scotland's farms and Scotland's products. And with that, you've got the first duty of any government is to feed its people. And food security is national security. Stuff Trident. You can't put Trident on toast and feed hungry kids. You know what I mean? So you don't have national security. The beast from the east, and I don't know about you guys, but for us with coronavirus, I didn't see pasta or rice or flour for 8 weeks, 7 weeks, 9 weeks. There was nothing on the shelves. Now, you can't tell me that investing in a weapon of mass destruction is a good, sound investment when as I sometimes say, Kim Jong-un could sail up the Firth of Forth, and if he had a pallet of bread and a couple of litres of milk, he'd be handed the keys to the city.
Before we go on to talking about the challenges, and I suspect you're going to tell me that they're very, very significant indeed. You mentioned the existential situation. How does Keep Scotland the brand function? You say you are part of it, but for the people watching and listening, can they be part of it? Or is it primarily directed at producers?
Keep Scotland the brand is for everyone. So I founded it. I generate the material. I'm the one who's got the Facebook page and the social media platform. But if it was just me on my own howling in the dark, the campaign would go nowhere. The campaign absolutely and completely relies upon how much people care about Scotland's name for business, how much people care about the quality of food in their plates, how much they care about our economy, because it's not just about food and drink. You're talking about our textiles, you're talking about our science base, you're talking about our veterinary studies, you're talking about our industry, you're talking about tourism and hospitality and culture. So it's not just about food and drink. But food and drink's an easy thing because you can see the carrot on the shop shelf before you. So yes, please, everybody get involved. In fact, so many people across Scotland have been involved. We have crowdfunded and through crowdfunding, because I have no budget, it's just me, I have no budget. Through crowdfunding, we have been able, and the goodwill and the dedication and kindness and support of people across Scotland, we have managed to print and distribute over 450,000 leaflets across Scotland, Keep Scotland the brand leaflets. And I think that's just a phenomenal effort, which really speaks of the nationwide feeling that people have about this. So yes, people absolutely can get involved. Speak to people about it. If you see products on the shop shelves that aren't properly labelled, if why is it we can't find own brand Scottish butter anymore, and yet we're being told that Scottish dairies are going out of business because there's no demand for Scottish butter? You can't support it if you can't see it. So,
what would your advice be then, Senator? What would your advice be to the man or the woman in the street who's listening to this, watching this tonight, and they say, gracious, this resonates with me so strongly because I see this every day. What would you encourage them to do? To write to the head of the supermarket, if it's a supermarket, or how ought they to take that motivation that they have and exercise it to make something happen differently and better?
Well, first and foremost, I think that this is part of a coordinated effort. I don't think that I don't think that the money that is coming into the supermarkets from customers is necessarily the primary driver. I've spoken to supermarket managers who tell me that they know that they can sell 4 times the amount of produce if it's labelled Scottish, but their managers further south won't change that. So they've told me that they don't think that this is purely driven on market. So that's one thing to bear in mind, is that we're actually maybe looking at something that is bigger than just the bank balance of the supermarkets.
What are they suggesting is the driver?
Well, I wouldn't wish to be putting words into anybody's mouth, but the David Cameron was the person who started the Great British Campaign, and that has been the Department for International Trades. That has been their mission for the last 3 or 4 years, and I hear from very well-placed sources that it is being ramped up to prepare for a blanket Brexit Britain sort of marketing campaign. Brand Britain is going to be what's going forward. Even though, for example, I get emails, or I used to get messaged occasionally by a very agitated cheesemaker in Cornwall who was really worried about losing his brand identity. And that's the thing. This isn't about Scottish protectionism. It is, if I see a lettuce from Lancashire, it makes me really happy. You know what I mean? Because I know where it's come from. If you have homogeneity, if everything's just this one sort of blanket, bland Brexit Britain label, it's going to be really bad for our business because Brand Britain in the EU, which is our biggest market, is a pretty toxic brand. But people know that Scotland's brand stands for something slightly different, or at least they identify with it more. They have a greater empathy for it. But if people want to make a difference, and again, I must reiterate that hundreds of thousands of people across Scotland already are making a difference. But if you go to the Keep Scotland the Brand Facebook page or website, somebody, and I have to say I can't take credit for it because it's a flipping good idea, and I wish it was my idea, but it wasn't. It was a lovely lady down in Fife. And the Send It Back campaign, I think, is one of the most effective ways that people can make sure that they're having an effective voice heard. So if you see something, say something for a start. Chat to people, chat to supermarket staff, mention it to the teller, talk to the people next to you. I mean, there's the amount of random conversations I have with complete strangers about Scottish butter. You would be surprised at, or perhaps not. But so this lady said, "What about the Send It Back campaign?" So there's a wee video I've put up about it, and it is pretty effective. So if you get your produce, you get your Great British carrots that actually should be Scottish carrots, Angus carrots, the more specific the brand. Actually, I think that every farm should be mentioned, and not these made-uppy Redmire nonsense farms. It should be. Let's know where our food actually comes to. Let's make farm-to-farm connections. So you get, for example, your carrot packaging, and I think that there's actually another issue to be made while you're writing your letter. Make the point that we don't need carrots to be wrapped in plastic. Let's have less plastic, please. But
so how does Send It Back work?
So if you go online, then as part of customer service rules that you have to have, supermarkets have to have a customer service email address. a customer service postal address. And it is a completely legitimate thing to do. If you are a customer and you're concerned, then you get a free post address from them off the internet, and so you make sure that the item that you're complaining about being poorly packaged, you make sure that it's clean and that it's dry. You write a nice letter. The more cheerful it is, the better, because or the more positive it is, the better, because of course you're sending a letter to somebody whose job it is to do their job, contact people, be nice to people, and you don't want their day to be bad because of us, so let's go. And they may well agree with the issue. So, so sometimes I will send doggerel. It did make me mutter when I could not find Scotland upon my butter. You know what I mean? That kind of nonsense. And then you wrap that up, and if you want, you can take a photograph of it. You can obviously make sure that we can't see your postal address. And then you can post it with Keep Scotland the brand, hashtags Keep Scotland the brand, hashtag send it back, and you send it away. And that way you are the supermarket's having to pay for you to send that letter. The supermarket then will have to log that letter as part of their customer research, the customer input. The supermarket may end up getting back to you, but all of these things are taking up supermarket time. And they are having to log it, and the more pressure that is put upon them, and I actually have seen research which shows that in the last 3 years, the amount of people, the amount of market research showing how strongly people want to buy local Scottish produce, not only in Scotland actually, but in England as well, has significantly. The figures have gone up. The figures may always have been there, but I think that people now are more vocal about it. So there's a definite movement happening in Scotland, and everyone can be a part of it.
Well, this will gladden your heart. Maureen Purdy has been in touch on Facebook, and Maureen says, love it. Wrote to Tesco a few weeks ago, got a polite reply saying that they hope to reintroduce Scottish beef.
Brilliant. On you go, Maureen. Thank you very much. That's a perfect example of, people just making sure that the pressure stays on.
Exactly. Well, it bears out the point you made. Does it also perhaps explain why it seems, at least on the surface, that supermarkets like Lidl and Aldi seem to stock more Scottish produce than the so-called major supermarkets such as Tesco and Asda and Morrison's et al. So
Lidl and Aldi have a different model. They have a short chain food supply model, which is one of the reasons that during the beast from the east, they didn't run out of food. Most people were still able to get food, and that's because you're not getting carrots being shipped down to Manchester to get repackaged and shipped back up. And I think also that Lidl and Aldi, as well as having the short chain food supply model, they also recognise that if they get local suppliers, they get a sort of better consistency of supply. The food is fresher. It keeps their costs down. And I think the thing that's really important for people to understand is that there are definite differences in farming between Scotland and England. So, for example, if you buy Scotch beef or Scotch lamb, that is farm assured. That is tracked and traced from birth up until it ends up on your plate, practically. When a lamb is born or a calf is born and it's a Scotch beef or Scotch lamb certified lamb, every step of that animal's journey is tracked. So you have got full life farm assurance, and it's inspected so that even the crates or the way the vehicles that are transporting it, everything is checked. So animal welfare is significantly higher. When the Conservatives put a bill back in 2017, I think it was, in December, saying that they wanted to remove animal sentience as a legal aspect of sort of, they wanted to remove the section of law which said that animals had sentience, which means that animals have feelings, and that animal welfare had to be taken into account. And that was removed. And the next day, the farmers of Scotland went pounding on Holyrood's door to say, we have to keep animal sentience, because that is a really important part of animal welfare. And you're not just talking about animal welfare in terms of, as I think is right, looking after animals, but you're looking at it in terms of if you're just going to be cold about it, you get better produce. If you can tell if an animal is slaughtered and it has been stressed or it has been hurt, you can see in the meat that the meat goes a different color. It's tense and it's not nice. You can see in the meat if an animal's had a bad life. But the farm assured scheme in Scotland is full life, and that is something that has huge kudos, not only at home but overseas, which is why in Malaysia, where people don't quite know what's happened to their food or the food journey it's had,
it seems to be what you just said is terribly, terribly important, and you would like to feel that people were aware of that. Now, I wasn't aware of that, frankly, and I've been around for more years than I care to count, and I've never heard of that. Now, part of that may be down to the fact that I don't eat meat.
I'm a vegetarian and have been since I was 14.
But I just never came across that information, and I hope if people aren't aware of it, they're aware of it now.
Well, let me.
Quick comment from Anne Smart. First of all, if I may, Anne Smart on Facebook is saying, but all the TV ads that she sees are British meat, regardless of where in the UK it comes from. How do we deal with that?
That is just why we have to talk to each other. So in Scotland, there are advertising campaigns from Quality Meat Scotland which talk about Scottish meat, and there are quite a lot of adverts about that. However, that's part of the Great British campaign, is that there's a lot of money being pumped into the Great British campaign. And there was a meeting, all the supermarket heads, well, I think it was Sainsbury's and Tesco's and I can't remember who else, but it was basically all the supermarket heads went for a meeting with Theresa May a year or so ago. I clocked that because I thought, well, here you go. That's going to be them, talking about Brexit and food security, and almost certainly I knew that the Great British campaign was meant to be getting a bit more of a solidified relaunch. But one of the other things that it's really worth bearing in mind, especially when we're talking about food standards being eroded with the Brexit bill and the agriculture bill coming up, even today with the red tractor scheme in England, so I think it's 90% of farmers, or over 90% of farmers, and sheep and Scotch sheep, Scotch lamb, Scotch beef, and quality select pork. They are all part of this farm assurance scheme, and the vast majority of meat being slaughtered in this country, in Scotland, is this farm assured traceable. In England, the red tractor scheme, that only means that depending on what kind of animal it is, the longer it's 30 days. An animal can have been, I think it's 90 days for lamb. I maybe get that wrong, but you can call an animal red tractor farm assured if it has been on your ground for 90 days. But you don't have to say where it doesn't. The life it had before that doesn't matter. So I can see a scenario where at the moment it's predominantly livestock coming in from overseas across Europe, which at least are being raised to relatively high standards. I mean, Europe has very high standards. But looking forward, that may well mean that the produce can be coming from anywhere, raised under any conditions. And it only has to be on a farm in England, the red tractor farm, the red tractor flag. All that means is that the animal's been on the farm for 90 days, and the whole life history before that, whether that animal came from a product that has been pumped full of all sorts, you don't know after we lose our agricultural standards what that's going to mean. And that really worries me.
Doesn't it also mean that the likelihood is that people have to trace margin, they have to chase margin, otherwise they'll go out of business. So when you introduce, if I may say so, inferior products from wherever, and these go on the marketplace, they go on the marketplace because they cost less. And therefore, what tends to happen, surely, in conventional marketing terms, is that you've got to drive to the bottom, i.e. that if you're competing with somebody whose standards are low but permissible, then you're in the business of trying to compete with that person. So therefore, the only thing you can do to avoid going out of business is to drop your standards.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Pressure.
Yeah.
There's a question come in, actually, Ruth. It's a little bit controversial, but you might want to opine on this. What are your thoughts on a boycott of the Union Jack brand? And Lenny Harry says that some of us are not buying these products. Is that helping?
So Keep Scotland the Brand is a positive campaign for provenance. And to be honest, a boycott campaign on food and drink is the easiest campaign for a government, for example, to crush. All you have to do is put a Union flag on absolutely everything. And at the end of it all, you're going to have to eat something. So in the end, you buy it and you go, oh, well, I tried and I failed and now I feel really bad about it. And also, so there's a number of threads to it, one of which is local people need local jobs. And I've spoken to farmers who say that they've walked out of supermarkets in disgust when they've seen the way that their produce has been branded, because they are proud of the provenance that their food has, and they know the importance and the value of the Scottish brand. The other thing is, if you live in a community like mine, unless you're prepared to travel for several miles to get to the next supermarket, there's only the food on the shelf that there is to buy. So if there is nothing on the shelf to buy, how can you, what are you supposed to do? And that's why the Send It Back campaign, I think, is very useful. And the other thing is that, well, local people need local jobs. And if you positively engage with people and say, okay, well, I had to buy this because it was what was on the shelf, but I'm going to send it back and I'm going to tell the supermarket why I don't like it. But the other thing is, the last thing that I wanted to do was to make people feel that, for example, their job might be under threat if they supported the campaign, or if they weren't good enough because they had to buy this produce, then somehow they weren't a part of the campaign. And I mean, I know people whose jobs, if you don't buy a product and somebody loses their job, how can they support your campaign? I
suppose the other factor, Ruth, is that you're right. There's a possibility that everything will get branded one way. The other issue is a moral one, which is that boycotts are met by boycotts. You know, if you say to somebody, "Don't buy this" or "Put it back," obviously that's a personal choice and people are free to do that. But if it becomes general, then it could be encouraged elsewhere in relation to Scottish products, and that really doesn't make a lot of sense, it seems to me.
No, and so I mean, I don't have an issue with buying goods from anywhere as long as it's been ethically made and ethically provided. And I want people to trade with Scotland and to Scotland and from Scotland. I think that there's a subtle but significant difference. I do not like boycotts, but I do like positive purchasing. Yeah. So I will actively choose to buy those things which meet my values. And I often will tell people that I will buy their produce because it meets my values. And I think that one of the strengths of the Send It Back campaign is that you're still able to buy the produce if you can see that it's a Scottish farmer or whatever. It doesn't matter. Actually, sometimes I've been known to complain. I've been known to complain on behalf of Lancastrian farmers. You know, it's actually let's not lose what we have, which makes us distinct and special. I like buying, for example, Jersey potatoes. Jersey potatoes are lovely. I think Ayrshire potatoes are amazing. But you wouldn't think of making a Jersey potato a Great British potato, because what would happen to it? And
exactly.
I mean, I think that I do not want to be somebody who is building walls. I want to tear walls down.
Excellent. That makes so much sense. On a sort of general note, people listening and watching might want information or advice, can you give us your website address, please?
It is www.keepscotlandthebrand.scot, and I'm always very grateful to the kind people, the supporters who fund our .scot domain name, because my campaign, this campaign, has no budget, and some very kind people have made that website possible. So it's an anonymous donation. I don't know who it is, so whoever it was out there who paid for it, thank you very much.
Now, if somebody wants to send you a donation, how do they do that?
Well, I actually don't have donations. I kind of don't need the money. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't. We did have a crowdfunder, which a lot of people supported for the leaflets, but actually Keep Scotland the Brand doesn't have overheads because I just do it at my kitchen table. So I think if you want to support the campaign, spend some time, buy some stamps so you can do lots of sending it back to the supermarkets, please.
Yeah. Okay, cool. There's a question has come through from Indie Warrior 73 on Periscope. Why does it cost more to buy Scottish meat in Scotland?
Well, there are two answers to that. One of which is because Scottish meat is raised to higher standards. And if you're comparing it with New Zealand meat, then New Zealand meat is raised to very good standards, but you will have a farm in New Zealand will be about the size of the half of Scotland. You know, so it's what you're saying, John, about different overheads and different expenditures. What is nuts is the way in which we've allowed supermarkets to just basically take over. I mean, supermarkets aren't the bad guys. Supermarkets put food on our plates and make it accessible, and there are some lines which are affordable for a lot of people, but there's actually no reason why food should be as expensive as it is, although it's in relative terms less expensive than it was. And that expensive cut of meat that's on your shelf, that money isn't making it back to the farmer. And I think that we have to have a real rethink about how it is the supermarkets make these massive profits, and yet many farmers are really toiling. They're running to stand still, and a lot of the time. So, for example, milk. A lot of the time, I was hearing that one of the country's largest milk producers makes a penny on a litre of milk profit. The rest of it is swallowed up. And I've heard of many stories of milk producers.
By what? By whom?
Well, by supermarket deals. The supermarket. So it's kind of what happened with pennies and with pennies and Marks and Spencers. You probably think, oh, it's fantastic. Okay. I've got this exclusive deal and it's amazing. And then you find your margins are being slashed and slashed and slashed. And then eventually they go to somebody else that they can kind of pimp out. So I think that one of the reasons it costs so much more to buy Scottish meat in Scotland is because there is, well, for a start, high standards cost, and farmers do produce food. It costs a lot to produce food, but if farmers were being properly recompensed and getting a better cut of the cut, if that makes sense, then I think that perhaps if supermarkets were a bit fairer, the things. We just need to shunt our food production and our food pricings, I think, in a way that makes it fairer for the producers and doesn't mean that people can't afford to feed their kids.
Okay. Is there somebody in the Scottish Government who's charged with looking at all of this? Because it makes so much sense.
I can't speak for the Scottish Government. I wouldn't dream of speaking for those people, but I do know that there are a lot of people within within Scottish agriculture who have a lot of conversations. If you ever go to the Scottish Farmer, a good plug, Scottish Farmer and Farming Scotland magazine. Well, I write for Farming Scotland magazine. I have a monthly a column comes out in that. But the Scottish Farmer, if you read those publications, you will see there's a lot of conversations going on about all of this to do with food and drink and food supply.
That's good. We've only got a short amount of time left, Ruth. So
time has flown.
Time has flown. Could you take off your Keep Scotland the Brand hat, maybe, and just for a couple of minutes, just put on a different hat, or bareheadedly tell us what you think the future for independence is?
Well, Keep Scotland the Brand, as you know, is a strictly party neutral, politically neutral campaign. However, I myself am deeply political, and I just keep, at the moment, I'm looking at what's happening in Scotland, and I think that we may be facing our Yugoslavia moment. You know, sort of nothing looks like it's going to change until suddenly everything does. And in many ways, I think that Scotland is facing a time of great peril, democratically and socially, and economically and politically, and it actually being part of the United Kingdom reminds me very much of my first marriage. It's let's just say I'm now happily married elsewhere, and I occasionally I just look at it, and it's just like that whole "you're nothing without me, but you can't ever leave." And it's horrible. It's horrible, and it's psychotic, and it is unjust, and it is iniquitous, and it's dishonest, and it goes against pretty much everything that I consider decent and honest.
Well, that's a very good summing up. Thank you very much for that, Ruth. Well, folks, our time is almost up. A big thanks to Ruth.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a great pleasure. Do check out our website, Keep Scotland the Brand. What you've heard tonight, I suspect, has only scratched the surface. We've had 60 minutes, but from what Ruth has been telling me, there's a whole raft of questions that come to mind, and I suspect many of the answers to those will be on the website. A big thanks to all of you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope you've enjoyed The Nation Talks to Ruth Watson. We have a formidable list of guests lined up for future shows. Stuart Cosgrove is up next week, and he'll tell us all about his illustrious career in broadcasting. And we'll likely, no doubt, talk about Off the Ball. You don't want to miss this show. Join us next Wednesday at 7 p.m. for The Nation Talks to Stuart Cosgrave. Look out for the Constitution column in the Sunday National at the weekend. It will be written by Dr. Elliot Bulmer. And very importantly, and I always say this, and it's true every week, support Indie Live, support Indie Live Radio. These folks are pulling out all the stops to provide you not just with a TNT show, not just with wonderful guests like Ruth, but also so much else besides. Go there, enjoy the programming, and if you enjoy the programming, send them a donation. They have a crowdfunder running. It's operating now at 60%. There's 40% to go. You can help fill that gap. I hope you will do so, particularly if you like the TNT show tonight. Oh, and by the way, we're still talking to the BBC. We're still suggesting and offering them a guest spot, just like Ruth enjoyed tonight, to come on and so they can tell you why people should enjoy their offerings. Join us next Wednesday for Stuart Cosgrave, 7 p.m. And remember, it's been a great day for British democracy. I want to leave you with two thoughts. Boris Johnson is in Orkney tomorrow, and the following day he'll be back in ignorance. And let me leave you with one little thought. Employomania, there's a word. You can use it all over the place. Employomania. It means manic desire to hold public office at whatever cost. Thanks for joining us. Good night, everyone. See you next Wednesday.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
And in life,